Eli Hargrove shoved his hand into the snowdrift and hit something soft. Not snow. Not rock. Cloth. And underneath the cloth, a chest. A child's chest. Not moving. No. He said it the way a man gives an order he expects obeyed. He pressed harder, fingers spread wide, and put his face down close, and waited, and the whole Montana night held its breath with him. A breath. Barely, but there. He lifted his head and saw the others, 3 more, tangled together in the dark, one of them still gripping a hat like it was the last solid thing in the world. If this story hit you somewhere deep, hit that like button and subscribe right now. And drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this reaches. Stay with me, because what happens next will break you before it puts you back together. The night of December 14th, 1886 had a voice. Not wind exactly. Something older than wind. Something that pressed down on Bitter Creek, Montana, with the patience of a thing that knew it would outlast every living creature beneath it. Eli Hargrove had been riding since before dawn. 22 hours of pushing cattle back from the north pasture before the storm made the road a death sentence. His hands had stopped hurting around noon. By nightfall, he'd stopped noticing they existed. His horse Drum stopped without being asked. "Walk on," Eli said. Drum didn't move. The horse's ears swiveled hard toward the western ditch, and a sound came from his throat. Not a whinny. Something lower. Something uncertain. Eli lifted the torch. The snow along the road's edge was broken wrong. Not wind broken. Not branch fallen. Broken the way something heavy and soft goes down into it and stops. He was off the horse before he finished the thought. 6 steps across the road. Crouched down. Swept snow with his forearm. The first thing he saw was hair. Dark, ice-caked, belonging to a girl maybe 11 years old, curled tight around something pressed to her chest. Behind her, a boy with a man's hat shoved down so far it covered his ears and half his face. Behind them both, 2 smaller shapes tucked in like animals in a burrow. Eli put his hand flat on the smallest one's chest. The boy, 4 years old at most, wasn't moving. "No," Eli said, not to the boy, to God, or the storm, or whoever was running things tonight. He pressed harder, leaned down, put his cheek close. A breath, thin as paper, but there. He got the small boy up first, tucked him inside his coat against his own body, and turned back. The oldest girl's eyes opened, brown and sharp and fighting, despite everything, despite the cold and the ice in her hair, and the fact that she'd been lying in a Montana ditch on the worst night of the year. "Don't you separate us," she said. Voice cracked, barely there, but she meant it with everything she had left. "I'm not separating anybody," Eli said. "I'm getting you out of the ditch. Can you stand?" "If I have to." "You have to." She stood, swayed once, didn't fall. He got the older boy up next. The boy grabbed the brim of that oversized hat the instant he was upright, like he expected the storm to take it. He was maybe 9. His jaw was locked so hard Eli could see the muscle working in his cheek. Cold or stubbornness, possibly both. The younger girl, 7 maybe, didn't speak. She looked at Eli with dark, steady eyes and let him lift her without flinching, but her hands stayed clenched around something white. A handkerchief, he realized, embroidered at the corners. "Drum." The horse had already moved 3 steps closer without being asked. Eli got all 4 of them onto the animal somehow. The smallest boy still inside his coat. The older 2 pressed together on Drum's back. The quiet girl held in his left arm. Too much weight for comfort. He walked rather than rode, leading Drum by the bridle through the last mile and a half into the teeth of the wind. Nobody spoke for a long time. Then a voice from inside his coat, barely a whisper, rough with cold. "You're scratchy." Eli looked down. The small boy had his eyes open and was studying Eli's jaw with professional interest. "My beard," Eli said. "Oh." A pause. "Are you a bear?" "No." "You walk like a bear." "I walk like a man who's been in the cold all day." "Oh." Another pause. Then, "Are we going to your cave?" "It's a house." "Do bears have houses?" "I'm not a bear." "Okay." The boy considered this. Then, just before his eyes closed again, "My name's Toby." Eli didn't answer. He kept walking. Ruth Calloway was on the porch with a lamp when they came up through the yard. She'd been watching the dark long enough that she'd already decided something was wrong. And now she was converting that anxiety into whatever form would be most useful. She took one look at Eli's coat, at the small boots dangling from inside it, at the 3 children on Drum's back, and said, "Lord Almighty." "Hot water, blankets, and whatever's in the pot," Eli said. 4 of them. Ruth was already through the door. The kitchen came to life fast. Fire stoked, lamp turned up, bowls coming down from the shelf. Toby's eyes opened the moment warmth touched him. He looked around the kitchen with the complete, unguarded curiosity of a child who doesn't yet know when to be afraid. The older boy, the one with the hat, went straight to the wall nearest the door, put his back against it, watched everything. The quiet girl found the spot by the fire and sat down cross-legged without being told, the handkerchief back in both hands. The oldest girl stood in the center of the kitchen and looked at Eli. "I'm Grace," she said, steadier now, warming up. "Grace Calloway. That's Sam." She nodded at the boy against the wall. "Clara," the girl by the fire. "And Toby you apparently already met." "Calloway," Eli said. "Yes." He looked at the hat she was still holding against her chest. There was a name carved into the brim in rough, uneven letters. He could read part of it from where he stood. "Thomas J." "Your father's hat," he said. Her eyes went to it, then back to him. "Yes." "Where is your father?" The question landed. Sam's chin lifted. Clara's fingers tightened on the handkerchief. Toby looked at Grace the way small children look at the person who holds all the answers. "He went ahead," Grace said, "to find work. He told us he was going to Bitter Creek. He said he'd send for us by the 1st of December. The chin went up a fraction. "It's the 14th. "Where did you come from?" "Millhaven, 30 miles east." Ruth made a sound from the stove. Not a word. "You walked 30 miles, Eli said. "We had a horse for the first 15. She went lame. We left her with a farm family." Grace said it the way people describe things that are already done and cannot be changed. "We didn't expect the storm to move this fast." "How long were you in that ditch?" The first crack appeared in her composure. Just a flicker across the eyes, gone in an instant. "An hour, maybe. Clara couldn't walk anymore. I told them to stay down until someone came." "That was smart." "We had no other choice." Ruth set 4 bowls on the table. Thick beef broth, steam rising hard. "Sit down," she said. "All of you. Eat." Toby pulled himself onto the nearest chair and grabbed his spoon like he'd been waiting his whole life for this exact moment. "This smells really good," he said, looking at Ruth. "Did you make this?" "I did," Ruth said. "You're really good at cooking." "I'm aware." "Can I have more when I'm done?" "You can have as much as you can hold, Toby received this information with the seriousness it deserved. "That might be a lot," he said. "I've been walking a real long time." Ruth turned back to the stove. By the set of her shoulders, she was deciding between crying and laughing, and had concluded neither was appropriate yet. Clara ate without a word, small, precise spoonfuls. Her eyes moved from her bowl to Eli and back to her bowl in a steady, quiet rotation, like she was running a calculation nobody else was invited into. Grace barely touched her broth. She held the spoon, watched her siblings. Sam didn't come to the table. He was still against the wall, arms folded, hat on, watching. Ruth noticed. She picked up a bowl and a spoon and crossed toward him. "You should eat," she said. "Come sit down." "I'm fine here." "You're not fine anywhere right now, son. You're half frozen." "I said I'm fine." He hadn't looked at her when he said it. He was looking at Eli. Ruth reached for the hat, just to move it, just to hang it somewhere to dry. She barely touched the brim. Sam moved so fast it startled her backward. Both hands came up and grabbed the hat, pulled it hard against his chest, and his eyes went wide and fierce at the same time. "Don't," he said. One word, not a request. The kitchen went still. Ruth stood with her hands up, genuinely taken aback. "Sam?" Grace's voice, quiet but firm. Sam didn't look at his sister. He was looking at Eli, with the particular expression of a boy who is waiting to see whether this man is going to reach for the hat again, and what he'll do if he does. Eli met his eyes and didn't move. "She was just trying to set it somewhere to dry," Eli said. Calm, not explaining, not apologizing, just stating what was true. "Nobody's taking it, nobody touches it." "All right." Silence. Sam looked at Eli for another long moment. His jaw worked. Then he looked down at the hat in his hands, at the name carved inside the brim, and something moved across his face that was too complicated for 9 years old, too heavy, too much. "It's his," Sam said, quieter now. "I know," Eli said. "He's coming back for it." Eli said nothing. Sam looked up, and for just a second, 1 second, the composure cracked, and underneath it was just a boy, a cold and exhausted and frightened boy who had been carrying an enormous weight for an enormous number of days and had not once put it down. "He's coming back for it," Sam said again. This time it was directed somewhere beyond Eli, beyond the room, toward whatever force in the universe he was still trying to negotiate with. "Come eat," Eli said. "Bring the hat." Sam looked at him. "I'm not asking you to leave it anywhere," Eli said. "Bring it to the table. Keep it in your lap. Eat your supper." A long moment. Then Sam pushed off the wall and crossed to the table and sat down, hat in his lap, one hand resting on the brim, and picked up his spoon. Grace released a breath she'd been holding. Clara looked at Eli with those steady dark eyes, and then looked away again. Toby, who had been watching the whole exchange with wide-eyed absorption, leaned across toward Sam and said in a loud whisper, "The broth is really good. You should try the broth." Sam's expression didn't change, but he dipped his spoon. Eli sat down across the table, not to eat, just to be at their level, and Grace looked at him straight. "Do you know him?" she asked. "Thomas Calloway." "I don't." "He said he was coming to Bitter Creek specifically." "It's a big territory." "He's not a big man, medium height, brown hair going gray at the sides. He walks like his right knee gives him trouble. Old mining injury. Scar on the back of his left hand, right here." She touched her own hand. "He's not fancy, doesn't stand out. But if you talk to him, you'd remember him. He listens, like what you say actually matters. Eli didn't answer right away. He'd heard something about the Copper King mine. He stopped that thought where it stood, and did not let it go further. Not tonight. Not until he knew for certain. "I'll ask around town tomorrow," he said. "Thank you," said plainly. Transaction acknowledged. Then Grace did something she'd been doing since they came through the door, and Eli only now realized he'd been watching it happen. Her free hand moved to her chest. Not to the hat this time. Underneath it. To something beneath the fabric of her coat, over her heart. Her fingers pressed against it for just a moment, like she was checking it was still there. Then she picked up her spoon. Ruth appeared at Eli's shoulder. "I'll get the room set," she said, and then lower, for him only. "Where on earth did you find 4 children in a blizzard?" "I'll explain later." "Eli?" "Later, Ruth." She gave him a look that had several layers to it. Then she went upstairs. Clara set down her spoon. Neat, quiet, finished. She looked at Eli the way she'd been looking at him since they came in. That measuring, patient look. And then she said the first word she'd spoken since he'd pulled her out of the snow. "You don't look like a bad man." The kitchen stopped. Sam looked at his sister. Grace looked at Eli. "I'm not aware of being one," Eli said carefully. Clara nodded once, reached into her pocket, took out the handkerchief and folded it very precisely and put it away. Then she looked at the fire and didn't say anything else, apparently satisfied that she'd gotten the information she needed. Toby looked up from his bowl. "Clara doesn't talk much," he explained to Eli, with the air of someone providing useful context. "But when she does, she's usually right." "Good to know," Eli said. "I talk a lot," Toby added. "Grace says I talk enough for both of us." "I believe it." "Is that bad?" "No." Toby thought about this. "Okay." He went back to his broth. Then, "Mr. Eli, do you have any animals besides cows?" "Horses." "How many horses?" "Enough." "Can I see them tomorrow?" "If you're here tomorrow." Toby blinked. "Where else would I be?" Eli looked at him. This 4-year-old who had almost died in a ditch 2 hours ago, and was now making plans for tomorrow with complete and uncomplicated confidence. "Nowhere," he said. "You'll be here." Toby nodded like this was the correct answer, and finished his broth. Ruth came downstairs and led the children up to the room she'd prepared. 2 beds, a cot, a fire already going, lamp burning low. Eli followed as far as the doorway. Grace paused before going in. She turned to face him in the hall. "That was his," Eli said, looking at the hat. "His father's first," Grace said. "His daddy was a cowboy before the mines took him. When his daddy died, he left him the hat." She looked down at it. "When we left to come find him, he said he was leaving it so we'd know he meant to come back." Her voice didn't change. Still steady, still direct. "He said a man doesn't leave his father's hat unless he's coming back for it." Eli looked at that hat. The worn leather, the rough carved name, the brim shaped by years of weather and use in one man's hands. "I mean it about asking in town tomorrow," he said. She met his eyes. 11 years old, 30 miles of winter behind her. Eyes that had stopped handing out trust for free a long time ago. "Why are you helping us?" she said. "You don't know us." It was the right thing to do. She studied him the way Clara had studied him, that long, patient, measuring look. "All right then," she said, and stepped into the room. Eli came back downstairs to find Ruth at the table, coffee in hand, done being patient. "Talk," she said. He told her. The ditch, the 4 children, the hat with the carved name. The father, they were looking for. Grace's hand pressed to her chest over something she hadn't shown him. When he finished, Ruth was quiet for a moment. "Copper King," she said. "Don't. Eli, if that's where, I don't know anything yet. But you suspect." He picked up his coffee and didn't answer, which was answer enough. Ruth looked down at her cup. They sat with that for a moment, the weight of what wasn't being said pressing down alongside the wind outside. "That boy," Ruth said finally. "Sam. The way he grabbed that hat." "He's been holding everything together," Eli said. "Him and Grace both. Different ways." "He's 9 years old." "I know. And Toby." Ruth shook her head slowly. "Talking to you like you've known each other for years. Like the whole world is just fine." She pressed her lips together. "It's not protective. He just genuinely doesn't know yet how bad things can get." "Which means he hasn't learned it yet," Eli said. "That's not nothing." Ruth looked at him. Something shifted in her face. Some quiet recognition. "No," she said. "It's not nothing." Upstairs, through the old wood of the ceiling, he could hear Toby's voice, still talking, explaining something at length, completely undeterred by the fact that the world had spent 3 days trying to kill him. The rhythm of it moved through the house like something the house hadn't felt in a long time. "What are you going to do?" Ruth asked. "Tonight, nothing. Tonight they sleep warm." Eli pushed back from the table. "Tomorrow I ride into town and I find out what happened to Thomas James Calloway." "And if it's what you think?" "Then I'll figure out how to say it right." He stood. "But I'm not saying a word until I know the truth. Not to them." Ruth nodded. He was halfway to the stairs when she spoke again, quiet, almost to herself. "Clara told me something when I tucked her in. Just one thing before she closed her eyes." Eli stopped. "She said, 'The other places we stopped, the men always looked at us like we were a problem to solve. He looked at us like we were just people.'" Ruth picked up her cup. "Don't think she means it as a small thing." Eli stood there for a moment. Then he went upstairs. He paused at the room where the 4 children were. Door cracked, lamplight warm inside. Through the gap he could see Sam sitting up in bed in the dark, hat on, both hands resting on the brim. He wasn't sleeping. He was looking at the window, at the snow pressing against the glass, and his face in profile was the face of someone carrying a question they don't know yet has an answer. Eli pushed the door open a few inches. Sam looked at him. Didn't speak. "You can sleep," Eli said. "I'm not tired." "You've been walking for 3 days." "I know how tired I am." Eli leaned against the doorframe. Didn't push. Didn't fill the silence with anything it didn't need. After a long moment, Sam said, without looking away from the window, "He's real particular about that hat. Wears it every day, even inside sometimes. Mama used to say it was practically stitched to his head." A pause. "He didn't give it up easy." "I believe that." "He gave it to me because he knew I'd take care of it." Sam's jaw set. "I'm taking care of it." "I can see that." Another silence. The snow moved against the window. "You're going to look for him tomorrow," Sam said. Not a question. "Yes." "What if you can't find him?" Eli looked at this 9-year-old boy, sitting in a stranger's bed, in a stranger's house, in the middle of a Montana blizzard, holding the one piece of his father he had left, asking the only question that mattered. "Then I keep looking," Eli said. "You have my word on that." Sam looked at him then, straight on, clear-eyed, with the assessing quality that seemed to be a Calloway family trait. "Okay," he said. That was all. Just, Okay. But he lay down after that, and the hat went under the pillow instead of on his head, which Eli understood to be its own kind of progress. He went to his own room and lay on his back in the dark and listened to the storm work against the house. He thought about a man he'd never met, who'd left his father's hat with his children as a promise. He thought about what that hat was going to mean when the answer came back from town tomorrow. He thought about what it was going to cost to say it. He'd built this house empty on purpose. He'd built his whole life, after Catherine died, on the principle that empty things couldn't be taken from you. Empty rooms didn't ache. Empty tables didn't remind you of who used to sit at them. 4 children had come in out of the storm and walked into every empty room he had, and he hadn't managed to close a single door behind them. Above him, Toby's voice finally wound down into silence. The house went quiet in a way that was different from how it had been quiet before. Fuller somehow. The silence of a place that is holding its breath rather than a place that has nothing left to hold. Outside, the storm pressed on. Eli Hargrove stared at the ceiling and did not sleep for a very long time. Eli was up before the sun, which was how he'd lived every day for the past 5 years. But that morning was different, because when he came downstairs, someone was already in the kitchen. Toby was sitting on the floor in front of the stove in his socks, close enough to the warmth that Ruth would have had something to say about it, holding a piece of firewood in both hands and examining it with the focused intensity of a scientist. He looked up when Eli came in. "This wood smells like something," Toby said. He held it out. "What does it smell like to you?" Eli looked at the piece of pine in the boy's hands. "Pine," he said. Toby smelled it again. "I thought so." He set it down carefully beside him. "I woke up and didn't know where I was, and then I remembered, and then I was hungry, but I didn't want to wake anybody up, so I came down here." He looked at the stove. "I didn't touch anything, I just sat." "Good. Can I have some of the bread from last night?" Eli cut him a piece and put it on the table, and Toby climbed up and ate it with both hands, and looked around the kitchen the way he'd looked at it last night, like it was a place he was already memorizing. "Mr. Eli," he said with his mouth full. "Don't talk with your mouth full." Toby chewed and swallowed with exaggerated care. "Mr. Eli, are you going to look for our dad today?" "Yes." "In town?" "Yes." Toby pulled a piece of crust off his bread. "Grace says we have to be patient. She says good things take time." He considered this. "She also says that a lot when she's worried, so I think she's worried." "She's being careful," Eli said. "That's different from worried." Toby looked at him. "What's the difference?" Eli poured himself coffee and thought about that for a moment. Worried is when you're scared of what might happen. Careful is when you're already getting ready for it. Toby absorbed this with the seriousness he applied to most things. "Oh." He ate another piece of bread. "I think Grace is both." "Probably. Are you careful or worried?" "I'm going to town to find out which one I need to be." Toby nodded like this was entirely reasonable. Then he looked at the fire again and said, very quietly and without any particular drama, "He's coming back. Our dad." "I know, because he said so. And he always means it when he says things real serious. And he said it real serious." Eli didn't say anything. "Grace doesn't think so," Toby continued. "She tries to look like she does, but she doesn't. And Sam thinks so, but he's scared. And Clara—" He paused. "I don't know what Clara thinks. She doesn't say." He looked up. "What do you think?" "I think," Eli said carefully, "that your father loves you. That part I'm certain of." Toby looked at him for a moment. Then he went back to his bread, apparently deciding this was enough to work with for now. Ruth came down an hour later and found Toby still at the table, now apparently explaining to Eli the complete history of a dog he'd once seen in Millhaven, while Eli drank his second coffee and listened with the expression of a man who is surprised to find he doesn't mind. Ruth caught Eli's eye over Toby's head. He gave her a look that said, "Later." She gave him one back that said, "Soon." By the time Grace and Sam and Clara came downstairs, Eli had already saddled Drum. He told Grace he was going to town, that Ruth would be here, that they were to eat breakfast and stay close to the house. Grace looked at him with that measuring look and said, "You'll tell us what you find, whatever it is." "Yes," he said, "even if it's bad." "Even then." She nodded and went to help Ruth with breakfast. Sam was standing on the porch when Eli led Drum out. The boy had the hat on again. He watched Eli mount up without saying anything. Then, just as Eli turned the horse toward the road, Sam spoke. "He went to the Copper King," Sam said. "That's what he wrote, in the letter." Eli stopped, turned in the saddle. Sam was looking at him straight on. "I'm not supposed to know. Grace keeps the letter, but I looked at it once when she was sleeping." His jaw was set. "The Copper King mine, north side of the valley. That's where he was going." Eli held the boy's gaze and didn't look away and didn't lie. "I know where it is," he said. "Is it bad?" Sam asked. "Whatever you already think, is it bad?" "I'm going to find out the truth before I say anything to anybody." Sam's hand went to the brim of the hat. "He made me a promise," he said, "the night before he left. He took me outside and he said, 'Sam, I am coming back this time. I am coming back, and we're going to have a real house, and you're never going to have to be the man of things again.' That's what he said." His voice didn't break. He'd been working very hard for a very long time at not letting it break. He said it like he meant it. "I believe he did mean it," Eli said. Sam looked at the ground. "Just find out the truth," he said. "That's all. Just find out the actual truth." "That's exactly what I'm going to do." He rode out. He didn't look back, but he knew Sam was standing on that porch watching him go, and he kept Drum at a pace that looked like a man heading somewhere with purpose, rather than a man heading somewhere with dread, because that was the only thing he could still do for that boy right now. The town of Bitter Creek took 30 minutes to reach when the roads were clear. This morning, it took 50. The snow had stopped overnight, but it had left everything buried, and the cold had come back down hard on top of it. And the valley road was a thing to be negotiated rather than traveled. He went to the land office first, then the post, then the sheriff's office, where a deputy named Greer, who'd been in the valley for 6 years, said, yes, he knew about the Copper King. Everybody knew about the Copper King. November 3rd, Greer said. He'd taken his hat off. He was holding it in both hands. North shaft collapsed. 16 men confirmed dead. 2 more still unaccounted for at last count. He paused. We put the names up on the board outside the post office. Been there since November 5th. Thomas James Calloway, Eli said. Greer went to a ledger on the desk, ran his finger down the page, stopped. Listed as missing, presumed, Greer said. He wasn't carrying papers when they brought the men out. Took a while to confirm some of the names. He looked up. You know him? I know his children. Greer was quiet for a moment. How many? 4. Greer set the ledger down. He looked at Eli with the particular expression of a man who has delivered enough bad news that he recognizes the weight of it landing on someone else. I'm sorry, he said. Genuinely. Eli didn't say anything. He stood there for a moment, with the information settling into him the way cold settles into a man who's been outside too long. Not all at once, but steadily, working its way in. The name on the list, Eli said. It was written down by who? Mine foreman, man named Pritchard, Is he in town? He's at the Valley Inn most mornings. Eli thanked him and left. Pritchard was a heavy-set man with a foreman's hands and a foreman's eyes, the kind that had seen enough bad things that they'd developed a permanent squint against the world. He was on his second coffee when Eli found him. He confirmed what Greer had said, and then he said something else. Calloway was a good worker, Pritchard said. He was staring at his cup. Quiet man. Kept to himself mostly, but he was reliable. Came in every day on time, did what he was told, didn't complain. He paused. Night before the collapse, he came and asked me to hold his pay envelope separate from the others. Said he needed to send it somewhere soon as possible. Said he had children waiting. Pritchard turned the cup in his hands. I told him I'd hold it. We never got the chance. Was it fast? Eli asked. Not because he needed to know, because someone would need to know eventually. The men who were in the north shaft. Yes, Pritchard said. He said it simply and quietly, and with the kind of finality that meant he didn't intend to say more, and Eli understood that to be its own kind of mercy. He rode back to the ranch the long way without meaning to, not because the long way was easier, because he needed the time. He needed the 50 minutes on a cold road to figure out how a man tells 4 children who walked 30 miles through a Montana winter because they believed that the thing they believed in is gone. He didn't figure it out. He arrived at the ranch with no answer for that question, and he stood in the yard for a moment with his hand on Drum's neck, and the horse stood still and let him, which was one of the things he'd always valued about that particular animal. Ruth came to the door. She read his face in about 2 seconds, and her own face did something complicated, and then went still. "Where are they?" Eli asked. "Grace and Clara are in the kitchen. Sam took Toby out to see the horses." She paused. "Should I call them in?" "Not yet." He tied Drum to the post. "I need to think about how to say this." "There's no good way," Ruth said. "I know that. But there are better and worse ways, and I'd like to find one of the better ones." Ruth stepped aside to let him in. In the kitchen, Grace was at the table with a book Ruth had given her, though she wasn't reading it. She was holding it and looking at the door. Clara was beside her, the handkerchief on the table in front of her, smoothing it out with her small fingers, the way someone does when they need their hands to be doing something. They both looked up when Eli came in. Grace's face did what Sam's jaw had done that morning. It set, like a person preparing for impact. She'd known since before he left. Maybe before that. Maybe she'd known since Millhaven. "Sit down," she said to Eli. Not a command, an invitation from someone who understood that what was coming needed to be sitting down for. He sat. Clara stopped smoothing the handkerchief. Her hands went still. "The Copper King Mine," Eli said. "North Shaft, November 3rd. Grace's hands were flat on the table. She looked at them. "He's gone," she said. Not a question. "Yes." The words sat in the room. Clara picked up the handkerchief and pressed it between both palms without looking up. Grace kept looking at her hands on the table, and Eli watched her absorb it. Not fall apart, not break down. Just take the weight of it and hold it, and keep holding it, the way she'd been holding everything for a long time. "Did it?" She stopped, started again. "Was it fast?" "Yes," Eli said. The foreman confirmed it. He didn't suffer. Grace nodded. One small, careful nod. "He was sending money," Eli said. "He'd asked the foreman to hold his pay envelope separate. He was trying to get it to you." Something moved across Grace's face. A tide of something she wasn't going to let out right now. Not here, not yet. But it moved through her and left a mark. "He was trying," she said. "He was trying," Eli agreed. "Right up until the end, he was trying." Clara stood up. She crossed to Grace and put her arms around her sister's neck from behind, pressing her face into Grace's hair. And Grace's hands came up and held onto Clara's arms, and they stayed like that, without making a sound. Eli stood up. He went to the door and looked out toward the barn, where he could see Sam and Toby moving around outside, Toby's voice carrying in small, bright bursts across the cold air. Sam walking beside him, with his hands in his pockets and his hat pulled down. He watched them for a moment, then he pulled his coat back on. "I'll tell Sam," he said to Ruth, who had appeared soundlessly behind him. "He's going to take it hard," Ruth said. "I know. He's been holding on to that hat like it was the only thing between him and the truth." "I know that too." Eli looked out at the boy, crossing the yard, "which is why it has to come from me. He's not going to want the girls to see him." Ruth pressed her lips together and didn't argue because she understood what he meant. Eli walked out into the cold. Toby was explaining something to one of the mares with considerable earnestness, one hand on the horse's nose, apparently unconcerned about whether the horse understood or agreed. Sam was standing a few feet back, watching, and he looked up when he heard Eli's boots on the packed snow. He knew. Eli could see it. The way the boy's whole body changed when he saw Eli's face. Like something had been braced against a door all this time, and now the door was just open. "Toby," Eli said, "go inside and find Ruth. Tell her I said she should give you some of the dried apple from the shelf." Toby looked at Eli, looked at Sam. He was 4 years old, and he didn't have words for what he was reading in the air between them, but he felt it. The way small children feel weather before it arrives. He looked at his brother one more time, and then he turned and trotted toward the house without arguing, which was the most quietly devastating thing Eli had seen all morning. Sam waited until the door closed behind him. "Tell me," he said. Eli told him. He said it plainly and directly, and without softening it beyond what was true. The mine, the date, the confirmation, and the pay envelope the foreman had been holding, and what that meant about what his father had been doing right up until the end. Sam listened without moving. His hands were at his sides. His face had gone very still. When Eli finished, Sam said nothing for a long moment. Then he took the hat off. He looked at it, at the worn brim, the shaped crown, the name carved inside in those rough, uneven letters. He looked at it the way a person looks at something they've been gripping for so long they've lost feeling in their fingers and only now realize how hard they've been holding on. "He's not coming back for it," Sam said. "No." Sam's jaw worked. His eyes were bright, and he was fighting it with everything he had. And Eli recognized that fight because he'd fought it himself many times after Catherine died, and he had never once thought less of himself for losing it. "It's all right," Eli said. "There's nobody here but us." That was what did it. Not the gentleness. Sam had steel enough to resist gentleness. It was the privacy of it. The understanding that this moment belonged to him, and no one was going to witness it, and no one was going to require him to hold himself together through it. Sam's face broke. He didn't make much noise. He'd been trained too long in the practice of crying quietly, crying in a way that didn't alarm the younger ones, crying like someone who'd learned that grief had to be conducted efficiently and then set aside. But his shoulders came down for the first time in God only knew how long, and the hat came against his chest, and he stood there in the cold outside the barn and cried for his father. Eli didn't touch him. He didn't speak. He stood close enough that Sam would know he was there, and far enough that Sam had room. And he stayed, because staying was the thing. Ruth had told him that once, early on, in the months after Catherine, when he hadn't known what to do with the formlessness of grief. "Sometimes you just have to stay," she'd said. "That's the whole job. Just stay." After a while, Sam straightened. He pulled his sleeve across his face. He took a breath that shuddered on the way in and came out steadier. He looked at the hat in his hands. "He gave it to me," Sam said. He said it was mine to keep now. He said his daddy gave it to him, and now he was giving it to me." "That's yours then," Eli said. "Nobody can change that." Sam turned the hat over in his hands. Then he put it back on, pulled the brim down, set his jaw again, but differently now, less like a wall holding something back, and more like a decision being made. "Toby doesn't understand yet," Sam said. "No. He's going to ask about Dad, a lot, for a long time. Probably. And Clara's going to go quiet. She does that. She goes real quiet, and you have to just let her." "I'll remember that." Sam looked at him, really looked at him, the way he'd been doing since last night, that long, measuring assessment. But something in it had shifted. Some part of the calculation had changed. "What happens to us now?" Sam asked. It was the question Eli had been turning over since he left the sheriff's office, for the whole 50 minutes back on the cold road, and the answer had arrived somewhere in the middle of it without him entirely deciding to let it. "You stay here," Eli said. "All four of you, for as long as you need." Sam was quiet for a moment. "That might be a long time," he said. "I'm aware of that. We're not easy. I didn't expect you to be." Sam looked at the barn, at the horses inside, one of which had been nuzzled and spoken to at length by his 4-year-old brother just minutes ago. He looked at the house where his sisters were. He looked at the snow, still deep and unbroken across the valley. The world buried and white and very still. "Okay," he said, the same word he'd given Eli last night. 2 letters, all the weight in the world behind them. They walked back to the house together, not quite side by side, but close enough that their boots made parallel tracks in the snow. When they came through the door, Toby was at the table eating dried apple with the focused joy of a child who has been given a small treasure. And Ruth was in the kitchen, and Grace and Clara were still at the table. Grace looked at Sam. Sam looked at Grace. Something passed between them that had no words and didn't need any. The language of 2 people who've been holding the same thing from different sides for a long time and have just, together, set it down. Clara looked at Eli. Her dark eyes were steady and clear. "Are we staying?" she asked. "Yes," Eli said. She nodded. Then she picked up the handkerchief and held it in her lap, and looked at the table, and was quiet, the way Sam had said she would be. Eli filed that away. Toby looked up from his apple. He looked around the table at his sisters and his brother. He looked at Eli. He was 4 years old, and he had felt the weather in the air, and he understood, in the way that young children understand things before they have language for them, that something had happened, and that things were different now. "Is Daddy not coming?" he asked. The kitchen held its breath. Grace's eyes filled. She didn't let it fall, but it was there. Sam reached across the table and put his hand over Toby's. "No, buddy," Sam said. His voice came out steady. He'd used whatever he'd spent out by the barn to buy himself that steadiness, and Eli understood the cost of it. "Dad's not coming." Toby looked at their hands. Then he looked at Eli. "But we're staying here?" he said. "Yes," Eli said. "You're staying here." Toby thought about this for a long moment. His face moved through several things that were too big for his face, and then it settled into something that wasn't happiness and wasn't okay, but was something quieter and more durable. The particular piece of a child who has been told the truth and has also been told he is not alone in it. He turned back to his apple. Ruth turned to the stove and didn't turn back around for a full minute. And when she did, Her eyes were dry, and her expression was composed, and she had clearly made several very firm decisions in that 60 seconds. Eli sat down at the table. Not at the head of it, not in any particular authority, just at the table, with them. Because that was the whole job, Ruth had told him once. Just stay. The days that followed moved the way grief moves when there are children in the house. Not in a straight line, not in any predictable direction, but forward, always forward, because children require forward whether you are ready for it or not. Toby asked about his father twice more in the first week. Once at breakfast, in the middle of eating oatmeal, he said, "Is Dad in heaven or just gone?" And the table went very still, and Grace said, carefully, "Heaven." And Toby said, "Okay," and went back to his oatmeal. The second time was at night, when Eli was passing the room and heard Toby's voice through the door, quiet and matter-of-fact, apparently talking to the ceiling. "Dad, we're at a ranch now. There's a lot of horses. I think you would like it." Then silence. Then the small sound of a child settling into sleep. Eli stood in the hall for a moment before moving on. He didn't examine what he was feeling. He'd found, in the year since Catherine, that some things were better approached sideways. Clara went quiet, as Sam had said she would. Not withdrawn exactly. She still came to meals, still sat by the fire in the evenings, still watched everything with those steady, dark eyes. But she stopped speaking unless directly asked something, and even then her answers were short and careful, like someone measuring out a limited supply. Ruth didn't push her. Sam didn't push her. Grace watched her with a particular helpless worry of an older sister who knows that some griefs have to run their own course. It was on the fourth day that Clara came to find Eli in the barn. He was working on a harness that had been needing repair since October, and he heard her footsteps and looked up, and she was standing just inside the door with her hands folded in front of her and the handkerchief visible in her left fist. "Can I stay in here?" she asked. "Yes." She found a crate near the wall and sat on it and watched him work. She didn't speak. Neither did he. They stayed like that for the better part of an hour, the barn sounds around them, horses shifting, wind against the boards, the small domestic noises of animals at rest. And at the end of it, when Eli set down the harness and stood and stretched, Clara said, without preamble, "Mama's handkerchief. She embroidered it herself. She made 4 of them, one for each of us. But Toby lost his, and Sam traded his for something, and Grace keeps hers put away. I still have mine." "It's a good thing to keep," Eli said. "She died in the spring," Clara said. 2 years ago. Fever." She smoothed the handkerchief across her knee. "After that, Dad tried real hard for a while. Then he stopped trying as hard. Then he started trying again." She looked up. "I think he was always trying. He just wasn't always good at it." "Most people aren't," Eli said. Clara folded the handkerchief back up. "Are you good at it?" He thought about Catherine, about the years after, about a house he'd turned into a held breath. "I'm better at some things than others," he said. Clara considered this with a thoroughness she applied to everything. Then she stood up and tucked the handkerchief away. "Okay," she said, and walked back to the house. Eli stood in the barn for a moment after she left. Then he picked up the harness and kept working. It was Ruth who finally said what needed saying. She waited until the children were asleep, which had become a kind of nightly threshold, the point at which the house allowed itself to deal with adult things. And she came to the kitchen table, where Eli was going over feed accounts, and she sat down and folded her hands. "Marshall Wade came by today," she said. Eli set down his pen. "While you were checking the north fence. He was here about 20 minutes. Ruth's voice was even. "He was asking about the children. Official capacity," he said. whether they were being properly cared for, whether there was a formal arrangement in place. What did you tell him? I told him they were being cared for excellently, and that if he'd like to check the refrigerator and the firewood supply, he was welcome to, but that I had bread rising and couldn't give him more than 10 minutes. She paused. He said the county has procedures for orphaned minors, that without formal guardianship documentation, the children are technically under county jurisdiction. Eli was quiet. He wasn't unkind about it, Ruth continued. Joel Wade is not an unkind man. But he said there are families in town who have expressed interest, that the county would need to make an official determination. What families? He didn't say specifically. He said there was interest. She looked at her folded hands. He's coming back on Friday with someone from the county welfare office, a woman named Aldrich. He said it was just a formality, just a check to make sure everything was in order. It's not a formality, Eli said. No, Ruth agreed. It's not. He pushed back from the table, stood, walked to the window and stood there with his hands at his sides. Outside, the snow was blue-white in the moonlight, the valley perfectly still. I'm not letting them split those children up, he said. Then you're going to need to be ready to say that to a woman from the county welfare office with something more formal than intention, Ruth said. You're a single man, Eli, on a ranch, with no legal relationship to these children whatsoever. I pulled them out of a snowdrift. That is not a legal relationship. He turned around. Ruth was watching him with the expression she used when she was about to say something he wouldn't like, and had decided that was his problem. You need to talk to an attorney, she said, before Friday. And you need to talk to the children, or at least to Grace, because she is 11 years old, and she has the right to know that someone is trying to decide her future without her in the room. Eli stood there for a moment. Then he said, Is Grace still awake? Ruth looked at the ceiling, listened. Probably. He went upstairs and knocked once, lightly, on the door. A pause. Then Grace's voice. Yes? He opened the door a few inches. She was sitting up in bed, not reading, not doing anything. Just sitting in the lamplight with her knees drawn up and her arms around them. Clara was asleep in the other bed. Toby was a small, bundled shape on the cot. Can you come downstairs? Eli asked. Just for a few minutes. She came. She tied her robe over her nightgown and came downstairs barefoot and sat at the kitchen table across from him, with the particular composure of a girl who had been called downstairs for serious conversations before and knew how to hold herself through them. He told her about Marshall Wade, about Friday, about the county welfare office, and the word families spoken without specifics. Grace listened without interrupting. Her face was still, the same way it had been when he told her about her father, that quality of absorbing weight without crumbling under it, of taking in hard information and sitting with it rather than fighting it. When he finished, she said, They want to separate us. I don't know that. Wade said it was a check. They want to separate us, she said again, not with anger, with certainty. That's what they do. That's what they did to the Hendersons' children after their father died in Millhaven. They called it placement. They sent the oldest two to one family and the youngest to another because nobody wanted three at once. The oldest boy, Patrick, he came by our house before they took him. He was 12. She looked at the table. He told Sam what it was like. Sam didn't tell me, but I heard. Eli said nothing. We are not being separated, Grace said. She said it the way she'd said, Don't separate us from the ditch, the first words she'd ever spoken to him, with the same stripped-down bedrock conviction of someone who has decided this is a line, and the line does not move. I'm going to fight that, Eli said. I want you to know that. You don't have any legal claim to us. Not yet. She looked at him. What does not yet mean? He hadn't fully worked it out yet. He was working it out as he spoke, which was not how he preferred to operate. but the situation was requiring it. It means I'm going to talk to an attorney tomorrow and find out what it takes to make this official. Formal guardianship or adoption or whatever the law says is the right word for this. Grace was quiet for a long moment. The lamp between them burned steady. "Why?" she said. The same question she'd asked him the first night. "Why are you helping us?" "Because you're here," he said. "Because you walked 30 miles in a Montana winter to find your father, and you deserve to be somewhere safe. Because Toby asked me if we were going to your cave, and I told him it was a house, and I'd like to keep that promise." He stopped, started again, more quietly. "Because 4 days ago I had a house full of nothing, and now I have something to come home to, and I'm not interested in going back." Grace looked at him for a long time. Her eyes were very bright, and she was holding everything together with the iron control of a girl who had decided a long time ago that she was not going to fall apart in front of people. "There's something I need to show you," she said. She went upstairs and came back with the letter. She set it on the table between them and smoothed it flat with both hands, the way Clara smoothed the handkerchief, a gesture of care, of handling something that mattered. "I've been keeping it," she said. "Sam looked at it once without asking. He thought I didn't know. I knew." She pushed it toward Eli. "Read it." He read it. Thomas Calloway's handwriting was the handwriting of a man who hadn't done much of it. Large and effortful, the letters formed with care, some of them gone over twice. The paper was creased from being folded and unfolded many times. There were 2 spots near the bottom that had blurred the ink, and Eli didn't examine too closely what had made them. "Grace, Sam, Clara, my Toby. I am writing this before I go in on my first day at the Copper King, because I want you to have it in case something happens. Not because I think something will, but because I have not always been a man who planned ahead, and I am trying to be better at that. I found work. Good work. I am sending what I can as soon as I can. The foreman here is a fair man, and I have already asked him about holding my pay separate so it goes straight to you. I have been thinking about what I want to say to each of you. Grace, you have been carrying too much. I know that. I have let you carry too much, and I am sorry for it. You are not the mother of this family. You are the oldest child, and that is different. You are allowed to be 11. I want you to remember that. Sam, the hat is yours now, not just borrowed. Your grandfather wore it for 30 years, and I wore it for 15, and now it is yours. You come from people who keep going. You are one of those people. Clara, I know you are watching everything. I know you see more than you say. I just want you to know that I see you seeing it, and I think you are the wisest person in this family, and probably always have been. Toby, you are the best thing I have ever accidentally done right. Don't let anybody make you smaller than you are. I am coming back. This time I mean it in a way I have not always meant things. I have a plan, and I am working it, and I will see you before Christmas. I love you more than I know how to say in a letter. Dad. Eli set the letter down. He didn't say anything for a moment. He wrote it before he went in on his first day, Grace said. He knew the mine work was dangerous. He was trying to be prepared. She looked at the letter. He was trying. He was, Eli said. I read it a lot, she said. When things are hard, I read it. She paused. Clara doesn't know what it says. Toby can't read it yet. Sam read it once without asking. She folded it carefully back along its creases. But I thought you should see it, because you're the person who's going to go talk to an attorney tomorrow and try to keep us together. And you should know who our father was before you do that. He should be part of this. He is part of this, Eli said. He always will be. Grace picked up the letter and held it in both hands. He said I was allowed to be 11, she said. I don't know how to do that anymore. I haven't for a long time. I know. Ruth shows me things in the kitchen. Not like chores, like she's teaching me something I might want to know. She looked at the table. I like it. Is it all right to like something right now? Yes, Eli said. That's exactly all right. She nodded slowly. Then she looked at him with an expression that had something new in it. Not trust exactly, not yet, but the first actual consideration of trust. The first real cracking of that door. Okay, she said. Go talk to the attorney. In the morning, Eli rode to town and found a man named Garrett Hale, who had been practicing law in Bitter Creek for 11 years and had the reputation of being thorough, which was the only quality Eli was interested in. He laid out the situation plainly. Hale listened, asked several precise questions, made notes in a small leather book, and then sat back. Formal guardianship is achievable, Hale said. The children are orphaned minors with no living relatives who have come forward. You can demonstrate you've been providing care. The question is whether the county welfare office moves to place them before we can file. How fast can we file? I can have the paperwork drafted by tomorrow afternoon. Do it. Hale looked at him over his glasses. Mr. Hargrove, I want to be straightforward with you. A single man petitioning for guardianship of 4 unrelated children is not a simple case. Mrs. Aldridge at the county welfare office is a woman who has opinions about proper family structure. She will have opinions about you. Let her have them. It may come to a hearing. Then we'll have a hearing. Hale studied him for a moment. He had the look of a man recalibrating his initial assessment. May I ask, what is your interest in these children specifically? The county will ask. I pulled them out of a snowdrift, Eli said. Their father is dead, and they have nobody. And in 4 days they have become... He stopped, looked at the desk, started again. My wife died 5 years ago. We were expecting our first child. After that I closed everything down. The ranch mostly. Myself entirely. He looked up. I had forgotten what it felt like to have a reason to come back to the house. I'm not willing to forget that again. Hale was quiet for a moment. Then he wrote something in his book. I'll have the papers ready tomorrow, he said. Eli rode back in the early afternoon. The valley was pale and cold and still. The mountains blue-white in the distance. The road empty in both directions. He rode without hurrying. He thought about Thomas Calloway, who had written the letter on his first day of work, because he was trying to be a man who planned ahead. He thought about 4 children who had walked 30 miles because they believed. He thought about what it meant to come back to a house that was waiting. When he came up the yard, he could hear Toby before he could see him. That bright, irreducible voice carrying across the cold air from somewhere near the barn. Then he could see Sam standing near the fence, watching Eli come in with his hand on the brim of the hat, in a gesture that was becoming familiar. A checking gesture. A making sure it's still there gesture. Sam walked over while Eli unsaddled Drum. How'd it go? Sam asked. Good. Attorney's filing papers tomorrow. Sam processed this. So it's official? Not yet. There's a process, but we're in it. Sam was quiet for a moment. Then, Mrs. Aldridge, the woman from the county, Grace told me. I know. What's she like? I haven't met her yet. But you think she's going to be trouble? I think she has a job to do, and she does it by a set of rules, Eli said. And some of those rules weren't written for situations like this one. Sam turned that over. So what do we do? We show her what she needs to see, Eli said. The four of you, here, together, doing all right. He looked at the boy. Which is the truth, so it shouldn't be too hard. Sam's jaw worked. And if she doesn't care about the truth? Then she'll have to go through me, Eli said. And I'm very difficult to go through. Something shifted in Sam's face. Not quite a smile. Sam Calloway was not a boy who came to smiles easily or quickly. But something in the region of one. Something that recognized the statement and its implications and found them acceptable. Okay, Sam said. His word, his two letters. He pulled the brim of his hat down and walked back toward the barn. Eli watched him go. Then he turned and looked at the house, where through the kitchen window he could see Ruth moving at the stove and the smallest shape of Clara at the table beside her. The lamp was burning, and the smoke was rising from the chimney, and the cold was pressed hard against everything outside those walls. And inside those walls, 4 children were alive and together and fed and warm. He stood there for a moment in the yard, taking that in. Then he went inside. That evening, after supper, Grace set the letter on the table, not open, not for reading, just there, in the center of the table where everyone could see it. Clara looked at it and put her hand on top of it for a moment, then moved her hand away. Sam looked at it and looked at Grace, and something passed between them. Toby looked at it and said, "Is that Dad's letter?" And Grace said yes, and Toby said, "Can we keep it here? On the table?" And Grace looked at Eli. "It can stay wherever you want it," Eli said. Toby nodded, satisfied. "Here is good," he said, "so we can see it." Nobody argued with that. Ruth cleared the supper dishes. The fire settled. Outside, the wind had come back, pushing at the house again with that particular Montana patience, that long, cold certainty. Inside, the lamp burned on the table next to a dead man's letter, and 4 children, and 1 man who had forgotten what it meant to have a reason to come home, sat together in the warmth and held, without saying so, without quite naming it, the fragile and improbable thing they were becoming. Friday came the way hard things come, not with warning, not with ceremony, just with the sound of a horse and buggy coming up the yard road while the morning was still cold and the children were still at breakfast. Eli heard it first. He set down his coffee cup and looked at Ruth, who looked at the window, and then at Grace, who had gone very still with her spoon halfway to her bowl. "Is that her?" Grace asked. "Probably," Eli said. "Finish your breakfast." "I'm not hungry anymore." "Finish it anyway. I need you to look like a child who gets regular meals, not a child who stops eating when she's anxious." Grace looked at him. Then she put the spoon in her mouth and chewed with deliberate, mechanical calm, which was not quite what he'd intended, but was close enough. Sam had already pushed back from the table. He was standing, hat on, hands at his sides. "Sam," Eli said, "I'm not going anywhere." "I know. Sit down." "I'd rather stand." "I know that too. Sit down." Sam sat. The hat stayed on. Toby, who had been eating with his usual unselfconscious focus, looked around at everyone's faces and then at Eli. "Is someone coming?" he asked. "Yes." "A good someone or a different kind?" "A someone who has a job to do," Eli said, "and we're going to let her do it. All of us are going to be polite and calm and ourselves, and it's going to be fine." Toby considered this. "What if I need to talk a lot? Because sometimes when I'm nervous, I talk a lot." "Then talk," Eli said. "Just talk about things that are true." Toby nodded gravely. "I can do that. I know a lot of true things. There were two of them, Marshall Wade, who Eli had expected, and a woman in her mid-50s who climbed down from the buggy with the careful efficiency of someone who has been making official visits for a long time and has learned to read a household in the first 30 seconds of walking into it. She was not unkind looking. She was not warm looking either. She was the look of a woman who had decided long ago that sentiment and duty were separate categories, and had kept them that way ever since. "Mr. Hargrove," Wade said. He had his hat in his hand. He always had his hat in his hand when he was doing something he wasn't entirely comfortable with. "This is Mrs. Aldrich from the County Welfare Office." "Ma'am," Eli said. "Mr. Hargrove." She looked at the house, then at him. "I appreciate you receiving us. I want you to know this is a routine assessment. We conduct them whenever minor children are found to be residing in an informal placement situation." "I understand," Eli said. "Come inside." They came into the kitchen. Mrs. Aldrich stopped just inside the door and took in the room. The table, the 4 children, Ruth at the stove, the letter still on the table where Toby had asked for it to stay. Her eyes moved across everything with professional efficiency. "These are the Calloway children," Wade said. "I know who they are," Mrs. Aldrich said. She looked at them each in turn. "Hello, children. My name is Mrs. Aldrich. I work for the county. I'm here to make sure you're all being well taken care of." "We are," Toby said immediately. "Toby," Grace said. "Well, we are," Toby said. "She asked." "She didn't ask yet," Sam said. "She was about to," Toby said, with the air of someone who has simply saved everyone time. Something moved across Mrs. Aldrich's face. Not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement. "You must be Tobias," she said. "Toby," he said. "Only Ruth calls me Tobias, and only when I've done something." "And have you done something recently?" "Not today," Toby said. He thought about it. "Not yet." Ruth made a sound from the stove that was almost certainly a suppressed laugh, converted at the last second into a cough. Mrs. Aldrich turned to Eli. "May I speak with the children individually?" "You may speak with them here," Eli said. "Together." She looked at him. "It's standard procedure to—" "They've been separated from enough things," Eli said. "They stay together while you're here. You can speak to each of them, but they stay in the same room." A pause. Mrs. Aldrich and Eli looked at each other with the particular attention of two people establishing where the lines are. "Very well," she said. She pulled a chair from the table and sat down, and opened the leather case she'd carried in, and took out a form and a pen. She looked at Grace. "You're the eldest, Grace?" "Yes, ma'am." "How old are you?" 11. "And you've been here how long?" 9 days. "And in that time, how have you been treated?" Grace looked at her steadily. "Well," she said. "Can you be more specific?" "We've had 3 meals a day. We have warm beds. Ruth has been teaching me to make bread." She paused. "When Mr. Hargrove found out about our father, he told us himself. He didn't make us wait or wonder. He came out and he told Sam privately first, so Sam didn't have to break in front of his sisters. And then he came inside and told the rest of us together." She stopped. That was more care than most people would have taken." Mrs. Aldrich wrote something on her form. "And do you feel safe here?" "Yes." "Do you feel that Mr. Hargrove's authority over you is appropriate? That he makes requests rather than demands? That you have the ability to say no to things?" Grace thought about this carefully, in the way she thought about everything. "He told me once that if I wanted him to leave a room, I just had to say so and he'd go," she said. "I've never had to say so, but I knew I could." She looked at her hands. "That matters. Knowing you could." Mrs. Aldrich wrote more. Then she turned to Sam. Sam looked at her with the flat, measured expression he used as a first line of defense against the world. "Samuel," she said. "Sam. Sam. How are you finding it here?" "Fine." "Just fine?" "Fine is a complete sentence," Sam said. Wade coughed. Ruth turned from the stove. Mrs. Aldridge looked at Sam for a moment. "Your father's hat," she said. "I notice you're wearing it inside." Sam's hand went to the brim. "It's mine." "I'm not questioning that. I'm asking about it." She said it without challenge, with a directness that was different from aggression. "I understand your father passed recently." 10 days ago, Sam said. "That's when we found out. He died November 3rd. "I'm sorry." Sam looked at her and tried to find the angle in it, the way he looked at everything, checking for the place where kindness curdled into condescension, or pity curdled into usefulness. He didn't seem to find it. His expression shifted slightly. "He gave it to me before he left," Sam said. "Told me I come from people who keep going." He looked down at the table. "So that's what I'm doing." Mrs. Aldridge was quiet for a moment. Then she wrote something. Then she looked at Clara. Clara looked back at her. "You're Clara," Mrs. Aldridge said. "Yes." "How old are you?" 7. "Do you like it here?" Clara turned to look at Eli. She studied him for a long moment with those dark, steady eyes. Then she turned back to Mrs. Aldridge. "He never pretends," Clara said. Mrs. Aldrich waited. "Some adults pretend everything is fine when it isn't," Clara said. "So you don't know what's real. He doesn't do that. When things were bad, he said they were bad. When he didn't know something, he said he didn't know." She folded her hands on the table. "That's how you know if someone is safe. If they tell you true things, even when the true things are hard." The kitchen was quiet. Mrs. Aldrich looked at Clara for a long moment. Then she looked at Eli with an expression that had shifted, not dramatically, not into anything as simple as approval, but into something more complicated than the professional neutrality she'd walked in with, she wrote on her form. Then she turned to Toby. Toby had been waiting with visible patience for his turn, which for Toby constituted approximately 30 seconds of sitting still before he began bouncing one knee. "Tobias," she said. "Toby," he said. "But you can call me Tobias if you want. Ruth does." "Toby," she said. "Do you like living here?" "Yes," Toby said. He appeared to consider whether this needed expanding upon, and concluded that it did. "Mr. Eli let me name one of the horses. Her name is Button now. Ruth makes really good oatmeal. Sam taught me how to tie a better knot than I knew before. Clara lets me sleep near her when I have bad dreams." He thought. "Also, the barn smells really good, like hay and horses and wood." "And Mr. Hargrove," Mrs. Aldrich said. "What do you think of him?" Toby looked at Eli with that total, unguarded attention that Eli had come to recognize as one of the particular gifts and particular weights of being known by a 4-year-old. "He's not a bear," Toby said. "I thought he was at first because he's big and he was in the dark and the snow. But he's not." He turned back to Mrs. Aldrich. "He carries me when I'm tired without making it a big thing. He just picks me up and keeps walking and talks about other stuff so I don't feel like a baby." A pause. "I don't tell him I noticed, but I noticed." Nobody said anything for a moment. Eli looked at the table. Mrs. Aldrich put her pen down. She looked at her form. Then she looked at Eli, and then at Wade, and then back at her form. "Mr. Hargrove," she said, "I understand you've retained Garrett Hale, and that guardianship papers are being prepared?" "That's correct." "I want to be direct with you. I have conducted many of these assessments, A significant number of them involve situations where I walk into a house and find children who are frightened or underfed or who answer my questions the way they've been coached to answer them." She looked at the children, then back at Eli. "That is not what I have found here." Eli waited. "However," she said, "I have a responsibility to ensure that the county's interests and the children's interests are properly aligned. There are families who have expressed interest in the Calloway children. Families with 2 parents, established community ties, and experience raising children. My job requires me to weigh those options against an informal placement with an unmarried man of," she paused, "limited child-rearing experience." "They're not being separated," Eli said. His voice was quiet and completely flat and left no room for interpretation. "That is not your determination to make at this time," Mrs. Aldrich said. "It is absolutely my determination." He leaned forward, both hands flat on the table. "I found these children in a snowdrift. Their father is dead. They walked 30 miles to find him because they believed in him, and the least I can do is be worth something close to what they believed in him for. I have papers being filed. I have a house, a livelihood, and 2 people in this room who can speak to my character." He stopped. "And I have 4 children who have already been through more than most adults survive, and I am not going to let a county welfare form undo the only stable thing they have right now." The room was very still. Mrs. Aldrich looked at him for a long time. Wade was looking at the floor. Then Grace spoke. "Ma'am," she said. Mrs. Aldrich turned to her. "I've been the one holding my family together since my mother died," Grace said. "I'm 11 years old, and I've been the one deciding when we eat and when we move and whether we're safe and whether we tell Toby the truth about hard things yet, or wait." She looked at her hands on the table. "I'm tired. I am so tired of being the one making all the decisions because there's nobody else to make them." She looked up. "Mr. Hargrove is the first adult in 2 years who made me feel like I could stop. Like someone else had it for a minute, and I could just stop." Her voice was steady. It had been steady the entire time. "Please don't take that away." Mrs. Aldrich pressed her lips together. "And the families who expressed interest," Sam said, from his end of the table. His voice came out harder than he probably intended, but he didn't walk it back. "Where were they? When we were walking? When we were in the ditch? Where were they then?" "Sam," Ruth said. "No," Eli said quietly. "Let him." Sam met Mrs. Aldrich's eyes. He was out in the cold for 22 hours working, and he still stopped. He still got off his horse and came across the road. He put his hand on the brim of the hat. "My dad tried his whole life to be someone who planned ahead and who did the right thing. And he kept almost making it, and then not quite. Mr. Eli, he just does it. He doesn't almost do it. He just does it and moves on like it's nothing." He took his hand off the hat. "That's what we need. Not a family with the right number of parents. Someone who just does the thing without making it a big deal." Mrs. Aldrich looked at Sam for a long moment. Then she looked at Eli. "The guardianship papers," she said. "When will they be finalized?" "Hale said he needed 2 weeks for the full filing," Eli said. "Possibly 3. "I'm going to recommend a 60-day provisional period," she said, "during which the children remain here, the papers are finalized, and I will conduct 1 follow-up assessment at the 30-day mark." She picked up her pen. "If everything at that assessment is consistent with what I've seen today, I will file a recommendation in support of permanent guardianship." She looked at him. "That is not approval, Mr. Hargrove. That is a process. You will be expected to meet every requirement of that process." "I understand," Eli said. "I mean every requirement." I understood you the first time." She looked at him for a moment, with something that might, under different circumstances, have become respect. "The children are not to be moved or separated during the provisional period," she said, in the tone of someone stating a fact rather than granting a favor. "They remain here." "They were always remaining here," Eli said. Wade exhaled. It was a quiet exhale, barely audible, but it carried 60 days of relief in it. Mrs. Aldrich packed her form back into her leather case. She stood and looked at the children once more. Grace, Sam, Clara, Toby, in a row at the table that had, over the course of 9 days, become their table in a way that couldn't be undone by paperwork. Then she did something that surprised everyone in the room. She looked at Toby. "Button," she said. "That's the horse's name?" "Yes, ma'am," Toby said. "She has a white spot on her nose that's shaped like a button. Well, kind of. You have to look at it right." "I see." She picked up her case. "That's a good name." "Thank you," Toby said. "I worked on it for a whole afternoon." She turned toward the door. Wade moved ahead of her. At the door, she paused and looked back at Eli. "Mr. Hargrove, I want to say something that is not in my official capacity." He waited. "What that girl just described," she said, "being 11 years old and carrying a family. I have seen that in many houses, and I have never seen it come out of a child who was being well cared for. I have seen it come out of children who had no other choice." She looked at Grace, then back at Eli. "You are the other choice. Do not take that lightly." "I don't," Eli said. She nodded once and went out. Eli stood in the kitchen after the sound of the buggy faded and the yard went quiet again. And for a moment, nobody said anything. Then Toby slid off his chair and walked across the kitchen and put his arms around Eli's leg, the way he'd been doing for about 4 days now. The way that had started as a casual gesture and had become something else entirely. Something that Eli was still learning how to carry. "We're staying," Toby said into his coat. It wasn't a question. "You're staying," Eli said. Sam made a sound. It was quiet and rough, and he turned toward the window before it became anything more. But Grace had already seen it, and she didn't say anything about it, just reached across the table and put her hand where his had been, on the brim of the hat, not touching him, just near him, which was Grace's way of saying the things she didn't say out loud. Clara stood up from the table. She walked to the middle of the kitchen and looked at Eli with those dark, clear, all-the-way-through eyes. "Dad would have liked you," she said. "He liked people who do the thing without making it a big deal." "That's what Sam said," Eli told her. "I know," Clara said. "Sam's right sometimes." She went to stand next to Ruth at the stove, close enough that their arms were touching, and Ruth, without looking down, put her arm around Clara's shoulders, and Clara let her, which was the first time she'd let anyone hold her since she'd arrived. Ruth caught Eli's eye over Clara's head. Her face was doing the thing it had been doing for 9 days now, that complicated, weathered, thoroughly Irish expression that contained about 14 different emotions at once and released none of them publicly. He looked away before either of them had to say anything about it. He went outside. He stood in the yard with the cold pressing down and the valley white and still in all directions. He could hear Toby inside, already explaining to someone, Sam probably, exactly what Mrs. Aldrich had said about Button, and why that meant she was actually a nice person probably. Thomas Calloway had written in his letter, "I am coming back this time. I mean it in a way I have not always meant things." He had meant it. Eli believed that fully. He had meant it, and he had tried, and the mountain had taken him before he could make it true. What was left then was someone else to mean it, Someone else to stand between those 4 children and the next hard thing, and the one after that. Someone to be the other choice, as Mrs. Aldrich had put it. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't planned it. He had gotten off his horse because it was the thing to do. And now here he was, 9 days from that moment, with guardianship papers being filed and a 4-year-old who had named a horse Button, and a 7-year-old who had just told him that her dead father would have liked him, and a 9-year-old who gave his word in 2 letters and meant every syllable, and an 11-year-old girl who had asked, quietly and without drama, for someone to take the weight for just a minute. He could do that. He was not a man who had ever been good with words, or with the gentler varieties of human warmth, or with any of the things that the Mrs. Aldriches of the world wrote on their forms under the heading of proper family structure. But he could do the thing without making it a big deal. He could be there when it mattered. He could not leave. He could be the kind of man that a little girl, 7 years old, described with the highest compliment she knew. He doesn't pretend. The door behind him opened, and Sam came out. He stood next to Eli, and they both looked at the valley for a moment, not talking, which had become their particular mode of being in the same place. Then Sam took off the hat. He looked at it, turned it over, looked at the name carved inside. Thomas J. Calloway, in those rough, uneven letters that had been formed with care by a man trying to leave something behind that would last. "I've been thinking," Sam said. Eli waited. "He's not coming back for it," Sam said. "We know that now. It's mine. He gave it to me, for keeps." He turned the hat over in his hands. "But I've been holding it like if I hold it tight enough, it proves something. Like if I never put it down, he didn't really go." He was quiet for a moment. "That's not what it's for." "No," Eli said. "It's for keeping going," Sam said. "That's what he said. You come from people who keep going." He looked at Eli. "So that's what I have to do with it. Not hold it. Use it." He put the hat back on his head. Then he reached up and pulled the brim down the way his father had probably pulled it down, the way his grandfather had probably pulled it down before that, with a kind of finality, a kind of decision. "Okay," he said. Same word, same 2 letters, but something inside them had shifted, had moved from the holding on side to the moving forward side, and both of them knew it, and neither of them needed to say so. They went back inside together, back into the warmth, back into the sound of Toby's voice filling up every available corner of silence with true things, the way he always did, the way Eli had come to depend on more than he would have thought possible 9 days ago. The letter was still on the table. The lamp was burning. Ruth was at the stove. Clara was beside her. Grace was back in her chair with her book, actually reading this time, her shoulders lower than Eli had ever seen them. Eli sat down at his end of the table. It wasn't a perfect thing. It was a provisional period, 60 days, a follow-up assessment, papers still being filed, a county welfare form with his name on it, 4 children who were still grieving, and would be, for a long time. It was nothing like what he had expected his life to look like. It was nothing like what it had looked like in the empty years. But it was real. It was warm. And everyone at this table was going to wake up tomorrow in the same house, and the day after that, and the day after that. That was enough. For now, that was more than enough. The 30-day assessment came on a Thursday, which was the same day Ruth taught Grace how to make proper pie crust, and the kitchen smelled like butter and flour when Mrs. Aldrich knocked on the door, which was either fortunate timing or the kind of thing Ruth arranged on purpose and would never admit to. Mrs. Aldrich came alone this time. No Marshall Wade. She came in, accepted the coffee Ruth offered, sat at the table, and looked around the kitchen with the same professional assessment she'd brought the first time, except that something in the quality of it had changed. Less inventory, more recognition. Clara was at the table doing the letters Ruth had been teaching her, working through them with the focused precision she applied to everything. Toby was on the floor nearby, with a set of wooden blocks Eli had brought back from town 2 weeks ago, constructing something that he claimed was a barn, but bore limited architectural resemblance to one. Sam was outside. Grace was at the counter with Ruth, her hands in the pie dough, her sleeves rolled up. Mrs. Aldrich looked at Grace's hands in the dough, and something moved across her face so quickly it almost wasn't there. "How has the month been?" she asked Eli. "Good," he said. "Specific improvements since my last visit?" Eli thought about it, honestly. Clara started talking more. Not a lot, that's not her way, but more. Sam has been working with me on the horses every morning. He's a natural with them. He paused. Grace has been sleeping past 6. First time since they arrived, she's let herself sleep past 6. Mrs. Aldrich wrote on her form. And difficulties? Toby had nightmares for about a week, middle of the month. Bad ones. He'd come find me. Eli looked at the boy on the floor, who was now explaining to his barn structure why it needed a bigger door. He doesn't knock anymore. He just comes in, and I pull the blanket back and he sleeps the rest of the night. He stopped. I don't know if that's proper procedure for your form. It's exactly the kind of thing I put on my form, Mrs. Aldrich said. She wrote something. And the older boy, Sam? Eli was quiet for a moment. He put the hat on a shelf, he said. Mrs. Aldrich looked up. Not permanently. He still wears it. But about 2 weeks ago he came in for supper, and he took it off and put it on the shelf by the door, the way you hang a hat when you're home. Eli looked at the shelf, where the hat was sitting right now, brim forward, shaped by years and weather and 2 generations of Callaway hands. He'd never done that before, always kept it on. Mrs. Aldrich looked at the hat for a moment. Then she wrote something that took longer than the previous entries. She spoke to each of the children, the way she had the first time. But it went faster and quieter, and there was less of the formal architecture of an official assessment, and more of a conversation between someone who had been paying attention and 4 children who had begun, cautiously and in their own ways, to believe that paying attention was something adults did. When she spoke to Clara, Clara said, without being asked anything specific about it, "I planted seeds last week, with Ruth, in pots inside because it's still too cold outside. Ruth says we'll put them in the ground in the spring." She smoothed the handkerchief on the table beside her letters, the old automatic gesture. "I've never planted anything before." "What kind of seeds?" Mrs. Aldrich asked. "Flowers," Clara said. "My mother had some seeds she saved. Ruth found them in the things we brought." She looked at the handkerchief. Ruth said the flowers would be from both of them, my mother and her. Mrs. Aldrich wrote on her form. She wrote for a long time. When she was done, she closed the case and looked at Eli. "The guardianship papers," she said. "Hale filed them last week." "Yes." "The hearing is scheduled for the 14th. "Yes." She looked at him steadily. "I'll be filing my recommendation today. In support." She picked up her case. "The hearing will still need to happen. The judge will make the final determination. But my recommendation will carry weight, and I intend to be present to give it." She stood. "That is all I can do." "That's plenty," Eli said. "Thank you." She moved toward the door. Then she stopped and looked back at Grace, who had turned from the counter with flour on her hands, watching. "Your mother's seeds," Mrs. Aldrich said. "The ones Ruth found." Grace looked at her. "Your father wrote that you were allowed to be 11, Mrs. Aldrich said. She said it quietly and simply, the way someone says a true thing they've been carrying around for a while. "I hope you're starting to believe him." Grace stood very still. The flour was on her hands, and her sleeves were rolled up, and she looked, for just a moment, like exactly what she was. A child, standing in a kitchen, learning to make pie. "I'm working on it," Grace said. Mrs. Aldrich nodded. Then she went out. The hearing was on a Tuesday. The courthouse in Bitter Creek was a two-room building that smelled like pipe smoke and old wood, and the judge was a man named Callahan, who had been on the bench for 20 years and had the face of someone who had stopped being surprised by human beings in either direction, their cruelty or their capacity for better. Eli sat at the table with Garrett Hale. The children sat in the row behind him, Grace at one end, Toby at the other, Sam and Clara between them. Ruth sat beside Toby, which was a practical decision as much as anything else. There were 3 other parties present. A couple named Forsyth, who had expressed interest in Grace and Clara. A man named Birch, who had, apparently, expressed interest in Sam specifically, on the grounds that a boy of 9 was almost useful on a farm. And a woman from the county who was not Mrs. Aldrich, but had Mrs. Aldrich's recommendation in the file in front of the judge. Hale had explained it to Eli the night before. It was unlikely, he said, that the other parties would press their claims against a favorable welfare assessment and a man of Eli's standing. But unlikely was not impossible, and Callahan was a judge who asked his own questions, regardless of what recommendations said. What Hale had not told Eli, because Hale was a lawyer and not a man who trafficked in the less documentable aspects of things, was that sitting in a courthouse, waiting for a stranger to decide whether your family stays together, is one of the particular specific hells that no amount of preparation makes easier. Eli had known harder mornings in terms of physical labor. He had not known a harder morning in terms of sitting still. Sam leaned forward from the row behind him. "Stop doing that," Sam said quietly. Eli looked back at him. "Your jaw," Sam said. "You keep doing that thing with your jaw. It makes you look like you're about to do something that'll get us all thrown out." "I'm fine." "You look like you're about to go through someone." "I said I was fine." "You told me once you were very difficult to go through," Sam said. "Today you need to just sit there and let Hale do the going through." Eli looked at this 9-year-old boy in his father's hat, telling him to manage his expression in a courtroom. "When did you get wise?" he said. "Clara says I've always been," Sam said. "I just only use it sometimes." From beside Sam, without looking up from her folded hands, Clara said, "That's accurate." Eli turned back to face front. He worked on his jaw. The Forsyths presented first. They were a well-dressed couple in their 40s, no children of their own, and the husband spoke with the careful fluency of someone who had prepared remarks. He spoke about stability, about community standing, about Mrs. Forsyth's experience with her nieces and nephews, about the particular importance of feminine guidance for 2 young girls. Judge Callahan listened without expression. When the husband finished, the judge said, "You're requesting Grace and Clara Calloway specifically, not the boys. We feel we can best serve. I'm asking whether you want all 4 children or 2 of them." A pause. "We feel we can best serve the girls' needs. So 2, Callahan said. He wrote something. "Thank you." The man named Birch spoke for about 4 minutes. He said he had a farm and could use a strong boy and would treat the boy fairly and make sure he was educated. He said it the way a man talks about hiring a hand, not the way a man talks about a child. Callahan looked at him for a long moment after he finished. "You want Samuel Calloway," the judge said. "Not the girls, not the youngest boy. Samuel specifically. A boy of his age is 9 years old," Callahan said. "He is not a farmhand. He is a child." He set down his pen. "Thank you for your time." Birch opened his mouth. "I said thank you for your time," Callahan said, and his voice had acquired a quality that made the room very still. Birch sat back. Hale went next. He laid out the case in the thorough, methodical way that had made Eli hire him. The circumstances of the children's arrival, the confirmation of their father's death, the 30 days of documented care, Mrs. Aldrich's assessment and recommendation, Eli's financial standing and property, the statements of Ruth Calloway as primary caregiver and witness. He entered Thomas Calloway's letter into the record, which he had asked Eli to ask Grace about, and Grace had agreed to without hesitation. Hale read 2 lines from it into the record. The part about Grace being allowed to be 11. The part about Sam coming from people who keep going. The courtroom was very quiet during those 2 lines. Then Callahan looked over the top of his file at Eli. "Mr. Hargrove," he said, "you're a single man, unmarried, no prior experience with children, a ranch to run. You want to take on guardianship of 4 children between the ages of 4 and 11 who are not related to you by blood or marriage." "Yes, Your Honor." "Why?" Eli had known this question was coming. Hale had told him it was coming. He had thought about what he was going to say. He had prepared something that was reasonable and presentable, and covered the practical and financial aspects. What came out was not that. "Their father wrote them a letter," Eli said, "before he went into the mine. He told his oldest daughter she was allowed to be 11. He told his son he came from people who keep going. He told his 7-year-old he thought she was the wisest person in the family." He stopped. He was trying to be someone who planned ahead. He was trying to make it true. The mountain took him before he could. He looked at the judge. "Somebody has to finish what he started. I'm the one who's here." Callahan looked at him. "That's not a legal argument," the judge said. "No, Your Honor. It's not a qualification." "No, Your Honor." Callahan looked at him for a long moment. "It's an honest answer, though," he said, almost to himself. He picked up the file again, turned a page. Mrs. Aldrich's assessment states, and I'm quoting here, "The eldest child described a reduction in anxiety, consistent with the establishment of a stable authority figure. The youngest child demonstrates secure attachment behaviors. The middle children show measurable progress in emotional regulation and social engagement. The placement is in the best interest of all 4 children." He set the file down. She also notes, off the record but included as supplementary comment, that the 7-year-old told her the guardian doesn't pretend, and that this was offered as the highest possible character reference. He looked at Eli. "Did a 7-year-old girl just become your most effective witness?" "It appears so, Your Honor." Something moved across Callahan's face. Not a smile, exactly. The predecessor to one. "Garrett," he said, "is there anything further from your client?" "Nothing further, Your Honor." Callahan looked at the children. He looked at them the way Mrs. Aldrich had looked at them the first time, with professional assessment, and then the way she had looked at them the second time, with something underneath the assessment that was more personal and less deniable. "Grace Calloway," he said. Grace stood up from the bench. She stood straight, the way she always stood, with that particular posture of a girl who had decided a long time ago that she would not make herself smaller than she was. "Yes, Your Honor." "You're the eldest." "Yes, Your Honor." "You understand what this proceeding determines?" "Yes, Your Honor. Whether we stay together with Mr. Hargrove." "Is that what you want?" "Yes, Your Honor." "All 4 of you?" "Yes, Your Honor. Together. All 4. Callahan looked at her for a moment. "You've been holding this family together for a long time," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, Your Honor." "Are you willing to let someone help with that?" Grace was quiet for a moment. Not hesitating, thinking, really thinking, the way she did everything. "I'm learning to be," she said. "It's harder than I expected. But I'm learning." Callahan nodded. He picked up his pen. "Samuel," he said. Sam stood, hat on, hands at his sides. "Yes, Your Honor." "Your father's hat." Sam's hand went to the brim, the old gesture. "Yes, Your Honor." "He gave it to you." "Yes, Your Honor. Said I come from people who keep going." "Are you keeping going?" Sam looked at the judge straight on. "Every day, Your Honor." Callahan wrote something. Then he looked at Toby. Toby, who had been sitting between Ruth and Clara, with the focused stillness of a child who has been told very seriously that this is an important day and has decided to honor that, stood up without being asked. "I'm Toby," he said. "I know," Callahan said. "Sit down, son." Toby sat. Then he leaned forward. "Your Honor, are you going to let us stay?" Ruth put her hand on his shoulder. "I'm working on it," Callahan said. "Okay," Toby said. "I just wanted to check, because Mr. Eli really needs us. He didn't know it before, but he does now. Ruth says some people don't know what they need until it shows up." The courtroom held a silence that had several different qualities in it simultaneously. Callahan looked at Toby for a moment. Then he looked at Eli. "You've been living with this for 30 days, the judge said. "Yes, Your Honor." "How are you holding up?" "Better than I expected," Eli said. "Considerably louder than I expected." "I reckon it is." Callahan looked at his papers. Then he set them down. He looked at the Forsyths and at Birch, and then back at the file. And he looked at it the way a man looks at something he's already decided. The petition for guardianship filed by Elias James Hargrove for the minor children Grace, Samuel, Clara, and Tobias Calloway is granted, Callahan said. Full and permanent guardianship, effective today. The children are not to be separated, as they are siblings and their interests are inseparable. He looked at Birch. They are not farmhands. They are not candidates for selective placement. They are a family, and they will be treated as such. He picked up his stamp and brought it down on the papers, which produced a sound so definitive that Toby flinched slightly, and then looked at it with wide eyes. "Is that it?" Toby asked Ruth, in what he clearly thought was a whisper. "That's it," Ruth said. "We can stay?" "You can stay." Toby turned to Sam. Sam was looking at the front of the room with the expression of someone who has received news he was expecting, but finds, now that it's real, that he wasn't as prepared for it as he thought. His jaw was doing the thing. Both of his hands were on the brim of the hat. "Sam," Toby said. Sam looked at him. "We can stay," Toby said, like it needed to be said out loud to be real. Like saying it to Sam specifically was the thing that would make it land. Sam's throat moved. He looked away. Looked at the ceiling of the courthouse, which was water-stained pine boards, unremarkable in every way. The kind of thing a person looks at when they are not actually looking at anything. Then he looked back at Toby, and he did something Eli had not seen him do, not once in 30 days. He smiled. It was not a large smile. It was a careful, effortful, first time in a while smile. The smile of a muscle that had forgotten how to do the thing, and was relearning it with rusty mechanics. But it was real, and it reached his eyes, and it stayed there. "Yeah," Sam said. "We can stay." Grace sat down. She didn't make a sound. She folded her hands in her lap and looked at them. And Eli saw her shoulders come down the last remaining distance they had been holding themselves up from. That final fraction of tension, the last guard, the thing that had been watching the perimeter for 2 years and had not stood down since the fever took her mother in the spring. He watched it leave her, and he thought about Thomas Calloway writing, "You are allowed to be 11." And he thought that Thomas Calloway, wherever he was, deserved to know that his daughter was finally, slowly, beginning to let that be true. Clara put her hand in Eli's. She did it the way she did most things, without announcement, without asking permission, simply as an act of quiet certainty. Her hand was small, and her grip was stronger than it looked. And she didn't look at him when she did it, just looked at the front of the room, where Hale was collecting papers, as if holding someone's hand was a thing so obvious it required no acknowledgement. Eli held on. They came out of the courthouse into the cold, which had softened slightly, in the way that Montana cold sometimes softened in the afternoon. And the sky was the hard pale blue of deep winter. And the street was mostly empty, the town going about its business on a Tuesday. Toby stepped off the courthouse step and held his arms out to the sides and spun once, his coat flaring, for no reason except that the situation seemed to call for it. Then he stopped and looked at Eli. "Can we get something from the bakery?" he asked. "Ruth says the bakery here has good things." "Ruth is correct," Eli said. "Is today a special enough day for the bakery?" "I think it might be the most special day we've had so far." Toby processed this assessment and found it satisfactory. "Okay, I want the thing with the sugar on top." "That describes most things at the bakery." "The round thing." "Still describes most things." "The round thing that has the jam inside." "That one I know," Ruth said. "Come on then." She took Toby's hand and they went ahead, and Clara followed close behind, and Grace fell into step beside Eli, with her hands in her coat pockets and her breath making small clouds in the cold air. They walked for a moment without speaking. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that had developed over 30 days of mornings and meals and evenings by the fire. The silence of people who have established that they don't always need words to be in the same place. "He would have liked today," Grace said. Eli didn't ask who she meant. "He liked when things worked out," she said. "He got so happy about things working out. Sometimes I thought he got too happy, like he was making up for all the times they didn't." She looked at the street ahead. "But maybe that's the right way to be. Maybe you should get real happy about the things that work out." "Probably," Eli said. "I'm going to try to be more like that." She glanced up at him. "Are you happy about today?" He thought about it honestly, the way she always asked things, and the way she seemed to require honest answers to them. He thought about Catherine, who had wanted a house full of children and a life full of noise, and who had not gotten 30 years to see it, but had maybe, in some way he couldn't name or prove, seen today. He thought about a letter on a kitchen table and a hat on a shelf by the door, and 4 children who had walked 30 miles through a Montana winter because they believed something was worth walking toward. "Yes," he said, "I'm happy about today." She nodded. She seemed to decide something. Then she reached over and took his arm, the way a daughter takes a father's arm, with the matter-of-fact ease of someone claiming a thing that is simply theirs. And they walked down the street in Bitter Creek, Montana, on a Tuesday, in the deep cold of winter, toward the bakery where Ruth and Toby were already in discussion about the round things with the jam inside, toward the ranch where the letter was on the table and the hat was on the shelf, and the horses were in the barn, and the seeds in the pots on the windowsill were, quietly and without ceremony, beginning to grow. Behind them, Sam had stopped walking. Eli heard his boots stop on the packed snow and looked back. Sam was standing in the middle of the street. He had taken the hat off. He was holding it in front of him with both hands, looking at it the way he had looked at it in the yard that day. That long, full reckoning with what it was, and what it meant, and what it was asking of him. Then, He put it on, settled it on his head, the way a man settles a hat he intends to keep. Not adjusted, not provisional, but placed, decided. He pulled the brim down with one hand, the old gesture, but different now. The way a gesture changes when it stops being about holding on and starts being about moving forward. He looked at Eli. Eli looked back at him. Sam walked to catch up, and when he fell into step on Eli's other side, the three of them continued down the street together. The girl with her hand on his arm, the boy with his father's hat pulled low, and the man in the middle, who had gotten off his horse in a snowstorm because it was the right thing to do, and had not yet found a reason to regret it, and did not expect to find one. Thomas Calloway had written that he was coming back, and he had meant it, and he had not made it. But something of what he meant had made it anyway, had made it in the form of 4 children who knew how to keep going, and one man who had learned at 40 years old that a house does not become a home until someone needs to come back to it. They needed to come back to it. He was the one who would make sure it was there. That was the whole job. That had always been the whole job. And Eli Hargrove, for the first time in 5 years, was exactly the right man for it.